The Belgian car race was supposed to be amazing in the rain, but it turned into a boring mess because the racing teams got tricked into setting up their cars for rain when the race ended up being dry. The race bosses and the people in charge are getting lots of angry complaints for what they did at Spa. But really, bigger questions need answers. What happens next? And will we ever see more use of the rain tires? What looked like it would be a rainy race, which is normal for Spa, really broke the hearts of 390,000 people who went to watch, and many millions more watching from home. The heavy rain that started about an hour before the race kept going the same way, making the drivers do their warm-up lap behind the safety car. Nobody blames the FIA for this. It's what they always do to check if the track is safe enough for driving. But here was the first mistake. On a really wet track, everyone had on intermediate tires. The amount of trust and use that the teams have in the blue stripe tires is basically zero. And that's the main reason why there's a problem whenever the rain starts to make things a little bit harder for both the race director and the drivers. Then they made a decision. The start of the race got delayed. There was a big rain cloud that was supposed to go away by 4:01. Local time, and they needed an extra 20 minutes for the racetrack to dry up even more. 4 laps were driven behind the safety car, and except for the pass that Perez made during the restart, and the amazing driving that Hamilton did, I don't think we saw that many fun racing moments at all. And I do blame the rules that the FIA gave the teams before the race. Even though we had a dry weekend before the Sunday race, everyone always knew that rain was going to be a big problem for the main race. Yeah, it was good that the race didn't start the 3-hour countdown time after the warm-up lap as technically the race wasn't started at that point, but everything that came after that was just a total disaster from the race directors. You knew it was going to rain. The whole grid knew it was going to rain. So what was the problem? If you're a team boss and you know you're going to set up the car for a rainy race, you use bigger rear wings and more downforce. However, that was exactly what ruined the racing that we were supposed to see mainly from Max Verstappen. His race engineers said that if they knew things were going to happen the way they did, it's definitely not the direction they would have gone with the rear wing. And this is definitely the main problem that needs to be fixed very soon. Max Verstappen is the one who talked about this in a bigger way, and when talking about the delay of the start. The 4-time world champion said, "Well, stopping the start procedure is kind of silly. I mean, you should just run a few laps. Jesus, they are way too careful now. The heavy rain is coming, and then it's going to be a 3-hour delay." The FIA didn't do a bad job by stopping the race at the beginning. It needed to happen because there was way too much water on the track. However, once it stopped raining with the wet blue-striped tires, I believe racing was totally possible. I do understand the decision from a safety point of view. We lost 2 young lives in 2019 and 2023 with Hubert and Van Hoof, but the drivers know better than anyone else out there what they're going to deal with once they get into the car. We've seen what happened last year in Interlagos, and we've seen that because of the changing conditions in this same place in 2008, Hamilton won his first championship. Rain used to be the main thing we got excited for when a weekend was coming up. But from now on, I don't think the fans or the drivers will be happy to see it in the weather forecast. And hat is why you need to ask yourself the big question. What are the FIA's actions doing to the sport? And are they actually hurting racing by trying to protect the drivers too much on wet tracks? There is a thin line between racing on the edge and putting the drivers out there to survive in the terrible conditions that the rain created. However, it's the same rain that built confidence in drivers like Verstappen, Hamilton, Schumacher, and Senna to become what they became in their racing careers. In 2025's Spa situation, I think it was an easy decision to put the drivers out there on the tires for wet conditions and see if the spray caused by the cars ahead would be too big to drive behind. Yeah, they would all be much slower, But at the end of the day, slow racing is way, way better than no racing at all. And I think that the vision was blocked because of using the wrong tires. All 20 drivers put on the intermediate tires to drive behind the safety car's warm-up lap when they knew what conditions were waiting for them out there. It shows a very worrying trend that needs to change soon. The FIA needs to do something about the blue-striped tire. It needs to be used more because Spa is a track where rain is always around. And when it's like that, you just can't depend on the intermediate tires only. The name says it all. The conditions need to be mixed for the green tire to make any sense. When everything is soaked, why not put on the wet tire and see who is a good driver in the rain and who's a bad one? Of course, with all of the other dangerous things limited. If the visibility is still poor and the drivers complain about it, then we'd be having another talk. Nobody is forcing the FIA to put the competitors' lives in danger just for the sake of the show. But make no mistake, with decisions like the ones that were made in Spa, the ratings of the sport will keep dropping. And another way more worrying thing has come up from this whole situation. How will this affect the future of the Belgian GP? We've seen over and over that the future of Spa was talked about mainly because of the money problems of the organizers, but at the end of the day, this is an iconic track that must stay on the schedule if we want to see traditional racing. Modern-day F1 cars are not made for street circuits, but I do feel that once the future of Spa is going to be brought up on the table once again, the weather conditions are going to play a huge role in extending the contract. On the contrary, the rain itself should be a very interesting and rather unpredictable thing that should build towards the argument of keeping Spa on the calendar for a very, very long time to come. It makes a lot of sense. If the drivers were allowed to race in the rainy conditions, then we'd see a lot more from Verstappen and literally everyone else who knew they were going to race in the rain. But now there is something that needs to be talked about very soon. What would happen with Formula One if similar conditions hit other European tracks just like Hungary, the upcoming one? Early reports say that rain is expected on Sunday. So if we expect one more mess like the one we've seen in Spa, I really doubt that the F1 fans are going to have a fun time watching the sport if they bother. So something needs to be suggested to the F1 teams, and I think the number one thing is more confidence in the wet tires. It's literally there right in front of your eyes. The conditions in Spa were perfect for it. I don't see any point in arguing about this because it's a topic that got a lot of angry feedback in the past. Even the FIA tried something by making the wet tires work better, but it seems to have not worked at all. Obviously, it's up to them and Pirelli to prove that the wet tires can be really good in a situation like the one we just saw in Spa. And it's way better to drive slowly and see who has the bigger talents in such conditions than to just stop racing and wait for the track to dry. Another problem is the safety measures that are taken by the people in charge. They are just too much. This is the top level of car racing. You can't have zero to no trust in your drivers. They are the ones who want to go racing. Of course, not under any conditions, but then it can all be traced back to the wet tires. If the visibility is much better with them, then the arguments of the FIA about safety concerns fall apart. With all this in mind, what do you think about the FIA's actions in Spa? And more importantly, do you think that they've made a highly anticipated race into a boring mess with their decision to delay racing? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.